I'm savage. I'm savage. About to go savage.
What up? This is Ben, aka Joyful Savage. Starting this video as the plane is going overhead. We're looking out here from Morristown in New Jersey, aka New Germany. We're discovering some spots here today. This is like a strategic location. It's called Fort Nonsense, and this is from at least from 1777. George Washington used this location to look out and see strategically the enemy. Morris Township is like situated between New York City and then Philadelphia, and this mountain range is along that. So I guess Washington, having had experience in the French and Indian War, which was in the 1750s, he had some generalship experience and he learned from it, and he used the high ground very often in his generalship. So I don't know, it's a cool spot. I just got done working. I was moving some furniture and helping out this guy, and he was a history teacher, so right here in Morris Township, and we were talking a bit, and he told me about this place, Fort Nonsense. And they call it Fort Nonsense because apparently it was like idle work, busy work, but I don't think that's how George saw it. And in hindsight, they didn't have to use this, but he had this as if it was like a chessboard, and he had this position that he could have used had he needed to. Given that though, having a conversation with the history teacher, and just a quick conversation, but I wanted to bring up the idea of what we teach kids in school, and learning to see like multiple sides of a story, and being able to have like a conscious light from which we view history. And I want to read some of General George Washington's quotes from the 1770s while he was leading the army. Oh, by the way, I have my Monero shirt on. If you guys don't know what Monero is, obviously I'm not hyping it because there's nothing I could hype to sell it, but it's a private cryptocurrency. Not just a normal cryptocurrency in which they can survey you and see what you're spending on, but this one's a private, as in they can't see, no one can see. It's all private and anonymous. So it has anonymity and other factors, and no one's been able to hack it yet. So that's why I like Monero. And maybe you should check it out if you'd like to see an alternative currency which a government can't just over regulate and then over pump into the economy and destroy your dollar and everything else, okay? All right, so this first quote, I don't know what year it's from, but I want to read it real quick. Oh, it's from 1776, January 4th, 1776. So this was like right after Thomas Paine made his common sense pamphlets that he printed up and gave out and kind of informed the readers. Okay, so George Washington says, "The reflection upon my situation and that of this army produces many an uneasy hour, when all around me are wrapped in sleep." He's saying everyone's asleep. They don't know what's going on. "Few people know the predicament we are in on 1,000 accounts. Fewer still will believe if any disaster happens to these lines from what cause it flows. I've often thought of how much happier I should have been if I, instead of accepting of a command under such circumstances, I had taken my musket upon my shoulders and entered the rank, or if I have justified the measure of posterity and my own conscience had retired to the back country and lived in a wigman. If I shall be able to rise superior to these and many other difficulties which might be enumerated, I shall most religiously believe that the finger of Providence is in it to blind the eyes of her enemies. For surely if we get well through this month, it will be for want of their..." Okay, I lost where I was, hold on. "Get through this month, it will be for the want of their knowing the disadvantages we labor under. Could I have foreseen the difficulties which have come upon us, could I have known that such a backwardness would have been discovered in the old soldiers to the service, and all the generals upon earth should not have convinced me of the propriety of delaying an attack upon Boston till this time." Okay, so those are, I mean, they talk in a different language 250 years ago, but he's saying that as he's looking out upon the country, the political opinion, and the amount of informedness that they are, it's very dismal. Very few people know the situation they're in, and he had wished that he wasn't, I guess, so awake, and he didn't have to take on such a responsibility to go and lead everybody, but it's the situation he's in, and he's stepping up like a man, and a man of divine providence. He's stepping up and he's doing what he needs to do for all the people that don't even know it, and all the future generations that need to know it, or need someone to do it. He's also saying that the enemy, it seems like they've been blinded a bit, which is awesome, and this will be his biggest test of manhood he's ever had. And I think obviously it was. Okay, so I want to read a few more quotes from him, because I didn't know, you just hear George Washington, you hear about founding fathers, American Revolution, but you don't really know much about them. I don't know much about them. I can say I'm pretty historically ignorant on a lot of this stuff, and that's why I'm taking the time to learn it, so I can inform myself. And just I had spoken to, the history teacher briefly, but he was saying that you can appreciate these things later in life, and I totally agree. You can't really appreciate it as a child unless you're taught more in depth, or you're taken to these sites, or you can somehow appreciate the historical context. Another thing, about the school system, I feel that obviously it's an indoctrination system, but getting to see multiple sides of a story and not just teaching kind of one side of a story, because even one of Washington's quotes right here: when one side only of a story is heard and often repeated, the human mind becomes impressed with its insensibility, or with its insensibly. So I feel that way about a lot of the school system, and almost like the science, I call it scientism, that they teach the kids, and the reductionist method of kind of like a flattened worldview. There was a big bang and this is what happened, this is what scientists theorize on, and this is what probably happened. No, that isn't what probably happened. That's what some scientists came to, and that's what you guys agreed to teach in the school system. That doesn't mean that's what happened. And it seems as if it's like you're just making people to believe that we're all just random numbers and data, which can be just like, washed away or swept under a rug or done whatever with. If you can justify things in the name of data, then you could justify a lot of things. You could justify a global genocide if you did it in the name of data. Oh, we need to, wipe out this many people on the planet just because, it's going to be better for the crops. Like, what? That doesn't make any sense, okay? So that's why I'm not a fan. If you're going to teach the reductionist scientific worldview, then you should also teach creationism and worldviews of divinity and God alongside it, so that children can be informed with the whole view, and then they come to the conclusion themselves, and not just focusing on one side of a story, which is what is beginning to happen in these school systems. They're teaching CRT, critical race theory, and like, oh, white people are inherently racist, and blah, 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 blah. Like, now you need to pay for what your ancestors did. I don't need to pay for anything. My ancestors weren't even here to do that. So how could you try and force that on someone who wasn't even alive to do that? How about we learn the actual history, we appreciate it and learn all sides of it, and then move forward in this lifetime, which is all we can control. How about we do that instead? Okay, how about we stop trying to make people feel guilty for stuff that they probably didn't even do? People that probably escaped Europe, they escaped poverty in Europe in the 1880s and the 1900s, and they finally made it to America, to the free world. And now what? They're going to be blamed for something they didn't do and they had no hand in? Okay, so let's read another line, because as I read more about the founding fathers and stuff, I see how similar the situation is actually right now and how parallel it is. All right, George Washington. The time is now near at hand which must probably determine whether Americans are to be free men or slaves, whether they are to have any property they can call their own, whether their houses and farms are to be pillaged and destroyed, and themselves consigned to a state of wretchedness from which no human efforts will deliver them. The fate of unborn millions will now depend under God on the courage and the conduct of this army. Our cruel and unrelenting enemy leaves us only the choice of brave resistance or the most abject submission. We have therefore to resolve to conquer or die. This is how George Washington was looking out on the land, and that's probably why he felt that way about, he wished he could just retire to the countryside and not have to deal with this. But that's not what fate had marked out for him. Okay, I like this too, because although we can misinterpret a lot of the stuff, because again, 250 years ago, they're using a different language, they had different entryways, they didn't have the internet, they didn't have access to information. They were more culturally conditioned to the times they're in, although now we're quite culturally conditioned to the times that we're in. But George Washington, he was big on Christianity, because I guess that was his entryway into divinity, into God, into a divine authority, a law of karma in this universe. And this was his entryway, and a lot of people get triggered by God and saying that, but that's your problem. You need to learn how to not get triggered by it. That's your problem only. See what he's actually trying to say with his words. Do not let anyone claim tribute of American patriotism if they even attempt to remove religion from politics. So I think what he's saying is a connection to divinity and realizing that we have a divine authority. The divine authority is not man, and another man doesn't get to tell other men or other women or other children how they have to live. And they don't get, hey, I get to break these rules because I'm the governor, I'm the dictator, I'm this, and you have to follow them. That's not what he's saying. He says don't let those people claim anything to do with Americanism, with anything to do with patriotism, because those are anti-American sentiments, and that's not what this nation was founded on. And yes, there was plenty of people who wanted the exact opposite. He's talking about England wanting the exact opposite. He's talking about countrymen wanting the exact opposite. And yet there was a small group of men who rose up and they fought against it and they resisted and they led to a better opportunity for future generations, in which he's talking about. Truth will ultimately prevail where there is pains to bring it to light. I like this one because there's a lot of pain in this world, and the only way that people actually ever grow, the only way that species ever actually adapt is through evolutionary pressure. So you need some kind of pressure placed on you, and we can even see it like with Nicki Minaj. Now her cousin, you know, her cousin's testicles are getting swollen from that shot that he got. And then now she's being personally affected. She's saying her cousins in Trinidad can't even work anymore unless they've had this shot. They can't even feed themselves anymore unless they've had this shot. I don't know about you, that sounds anti-American, that sounds very anti-freedom, because that sounds like coercion and using violence to get people to do what you want them to do, which is wrong, always wrong, and it's never right. Liberty, when it begins to take root, is a plant of rapid growth. The last official act of any government is to loot the treasury. Remember what I said about cryptocurrency, about Monero, private coins. Freedom and property are inseparable. You can't have one without the other. And last one, where are our men of abilities? Why do they not come forth to save their country? Okay, so I think that's some good historical insight into the mind of George Washington. I still want to get deeper into him. A lot of these founding fathers have a lot of letters that you can go back and you can read and understand a bit better their mindset during these issues that they went through, because these were turbulent times and they didn't know whether they're going to win, whether they're going to lose. A lot of them had that connection to a divinity and a trust in a higher power, realizing that what they were doing was a righteous fight and a righteous cause. Some people want to say, oh, you could never fight and be righteous. Wrong. If you don't fight and step up and do what is righteous to save yourself, to save your family, to save future children, future generations, then you are shrinking from what duty and honor dictates, and then spiritually you're going to go into a decline and you're not going to evolve spiritually and grow to the next level, to the next plateau. And obviously alongside that, other people won't be allowed those conditions to also grow alongside. And I think last thoughts on this is like, people, it's becoming like mainstream and popular to put down the founding fathers and to, you know, say, oh, they're racist slave owners, blah, 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 blah. What are you doing? I think some people need a good grilling. What are you doing? I can almost guarantee that you own a cell phone made by slave labor in China right now. What are you doing to stop slave labor? In 2021, not 150 fucking years ago, right now. So why don't you flip the finger back at yourself and say, what are you doing right now to stop and end those conditions? If you're not even having a conversation about it, you're a bad person. You're immoral. You're wrong. Some people need to be yelled at because you're so stupid and they're so asleep, so zombified out. But we need to have these conversations and we need to bring these to light so that we can awaken our dormant conscience, our dormant powers in our brains and in our hearts again, and realize what we need to do and how we need to restore order. Okay? Like, comment, subscribe, holler back. More videos to come, okay?